we're actually audience, people, listeners, viewers. We're here in Perth at the Watt Street Hilton. The Watt Street Hilton. They're under renovations at the moment, but it was low season, so we got a cheap, very cheap deal. Bless her. But I know Joy's brought some of her fabulous family photos here, her albums. She carries with her everywhere she goes. I think sometimes it's nice to remember who you are. Don't you find as you get older, sometimes people forget?
They forget who you are, and you need to remember who you are.
I know.
Not who other people are.
I know. And there you are, you've got these beautiful photos. And your gorgeous husband, Peter, here.
Yes.
And look at these gorgeous children.
Aren't they beautiful?
Who are they?
Well, do we go down them?
Yes.
Michael, Robert, who is now called Armand, Anne-Marie, Timothy, Anthony, Jeffrey and Jane.
Oh, wonderful. Now, I've heard a rumour that you used to say you didn't have any favourites, but really Armand was your favourite. I've heard that as a rumour.
You've heard that?
And I've heard the siblings often are sort of arguing and saying that they're the favourites, but I think this is an intimate conversation just between you and me.
Well, no, really, no. Nobody was the favourite. The other siblings all said Jane was...
The youngest. They got that right, didn't they?
Yeah, she was the youngest.
Thank God they were good at maths.
But they kept saying she was adopted, which wasn't correct. Because she was spoiled, they said. I don't know if she was.
She turned out well, didn't she?
She turned out okay, yes, in spite of.
She's in spite of everything.
In spite of everything. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. So, Jane, if you're listening, you weren't adopted. There you are, straight from the horse's mouth.
That's right.
There you are. We can put that to bed.
Yeah, that's right. After 51 years, put it to bed.
Yes, she just turned 51, didn't she?
She has just turned 51.
And she doesn't look a day over 40.
No, she doesn't.
No. And I think that's something, Joy, viewers, that I think you've always held your age really well, as I have.
Beryl, yes, you have.
People would have known we're almost the same age.
I have no idea how old you are, Beryl. You look fantastic.
I know.
I wouldn't even guess.
Well, we won't go there.
No,
some things are,
Yes.
But I think one of my greatest tips, for viewers who don't know, I run a finishing school for girls, and I'm Beryl Moist, by the way. We're jumping around here, but I know the editor will be doing a brilliant job. And Joy and me, we go back years, don't we? Joy and I. You were always so good at elocution. Joy was one of my first graduates at my finishing school. I used to take young women out of the streets, off the gutters, and transport them. And you're looking at one of my prized students here. Joy was one of the first people that I was able to share one of my unique beauty tips. Now, major fashion studios, top models in the world use hemorrhoid cream for facial wrinkles.
Oh, it has been wonderful.
I know. I've always said if it's good for your arsehole, it's good for your face. If it's good for your face, it's good for your arsehole. And you're a living example.
Thank you. That's good.
Yes. I think the hemorrhoid cream has done wonders for you.
I really enjoy using it. I make sure I've always got it.
And I think the way you obviously sit much more comfortably now, things aren't as painful. I think that's wonderful.
That's very good. Very important.
That's fabulous. And you have a drink there.
I would like
Joy.
a drink now, thank you, Beryl.
I love these little intimate occasions that we can get together. And I haven't seen Joy for years now, have we?
No, many years.
Many
probably
years.
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah,
And it's just
something
flown.
like that. Yes.
And you don't look a day older.
Oh, thank you, Beryl. You make me feel really good.
I know. Thank you. That's so good. So, Beryl, Jane, Joy, where are we? I wanted to... It's nice to keep the vocal cords lubed.
That's true.
So, Joy, I'm just thinking that this is an opportunity that for your children, your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, and all those other millions that are going to be seeing this, I'd like to get you an opportunity to share something about your life.
Yes.
And could you tell me something about your parents? They were called Anne and Alan.
Annie and Alan.
Annie and Alan. And
Yes.
where did they meet?
They met in Tambo, in Queensland.
And where's Tambo?
It's southwest Queensland, Western Queensland. My mother was the matron of the hospital there, and my father was managing a property there.
Ah.
And that's where they met. Yeah.
And how old would they have been then?
Oh, in their mid-20s.
Mid-20s, yeah.
Yes, yes.
And so they met there and they got married there?
They got married, maybe, I'm not sure. Maybe they got married in Sydney, I'm not sure.
Uh-huh.
My father came from Sydney.
Yeah.
My mother came from Cunnamulla.
Ah, so he actually went out to where she was living?
He went out west to go on the land, yes.
Yeah, and they met in Tambo.
Yes, yes.
How far is that from Cunnamulla?
Some distance.
Further
I don't
west?
know, look up the map. Yeah, further west, I think. Further northwest.
Northwest. So eventually your dad and your mum moved to Sydney?
Yes.
What was...
Well, they moved, after they were married, they went back to Cunnamulla, and he managed her family's property.
Mm-hmm.
But he got, being the dust that was out there, he got shocking antrim trouble.
So the
And
sinuses...
he was told, get out of the dust, you've got to go back to the city. So he came back to the city, and they came down here. And I was born in Sydney, but then I went back there for 3 years, and then we came back to Sydney.
So as a young child you were actually living in the bush
Yeah.
and came back. And so when your dad and mum moved back to Sydney, what did he do for a job?
I'm not sure, but I'm not sure, but I did know he then worked at the abattoirs as counting the animals as they went through the, whatever you call it, you know, there. And then the war started, and he went with L.A. Stewart's builders, and they were building up in North Queensland for the Americans. And he was a works manager for them all through that period.
All through the war?
And we were in Sydney.
So you stayed in Sydney and he was up there with...
We stayed in Sydney and he went up there.
Which would have happened, I suppose, to a lot of families. They would have had,
that's right.
you know, husbands going off to war or doing things to keep the war going.
That's right, yeah.
And so then, after the war finished, he came back to Sydney?
And he was still with L.A. Stewart's, and they were building a lot of war service homes. No, housing commission homes they were called, in the newer areas, newer suburbs, and they did those. Anyway, then he eventually started his own nursery.
And that was in Eastwood?
That was in Eastwood. Yeah.
And did he enjoy doing that?
He loved his nursery,
Yeah.
because he always had a beautiful garden, always had lots of vegetables. We always went up and cut our vegetables, you know, to eat. Had chooks, all those things. So he did love the nursery.
So then, that's where you grew up, you sort of spent
I
most of your
grew
life
up
going.
in Denniston.
And
yes.
then where did you go to school?
I went to the school at Eastwood, St Kevin's, in primary school until 5th grade. Then I went to Loretto Normanhurst in 6th grade to...
And you had a few other relatives, daughters, sons, grandchildren go to Normanhurst now?
I do. I have a granddaughter, Kathy Anderson.
Kathy, yeah.
I went to Normanhurst, as I said. My 2 daughters went to Normanhurst, and 3 of my sons went to Normanhurst until grade 2.
That's not bad for a girls' school, is it?
And they went to grade 2. The 2 eldest boys, called Michael and Robert, didn't go because at that point they didn't have boys. But the younger 3 went there. And yeah.
And the tradition has continued.
The tradition has continued.
And how was your time at Normanhurst?
It was wonderful.
So you lived in Sydney, but
I was a boarder.
you boarded all your time there?
Except for the first year,
First
in grade
year.
6.
Yeah.
And then I boarded from 1st form to 5th form, as it was then. And I absolutely loved it. I did cry for a long time after I went there.
At the beginning, yeah.
Whenever in that period of time, it was during the war. My father was up north with building for the Americans, and my mother went back to Cunnamulla, or Eulo, I might add, which is another town near Cunnamulla, to help her sister, who was a widow, who was running a property, and all the men had been called up. So she was up there for some months, and I was boarding, and I just loved it. It was, being an only child, it was absolutely wonderful. And you had to learn to roll with the punches, and it was the making for me. I just loved it.
Well, so can you say more about what it was that you loved about it?
Well, it was the caring of the nuns, and it was having friends there. I don't know.
So being an only child, so you had this community, you had friends?
I had a lot of people. I mean, but as an only child, I was never aware of being an only child, because I always had people there at home, and people would come and stay, and my mother was one of 6, my father was one of 10. So my mother particularly was very conscious that I had other people come, and that always happened. And then when I went to boarding school, on one Sunday a month we had Home Sunday, and we'd leave at 9 o'clock and go home. And I always took one of the boarders with me. And as a result, every May and September holidays, we had 3 terms in those days, I'd go to the country with them for holidays.
So you were never really alone?
I was never really alone. And it was in latter years, I realised what a fantastic person my mother was, because she could have said, you stay here with me. She was always happy for me to go to the country, because she was from the country.
Yeah.
And it was just wonderful.
So you really appreciated the freedom she gave you.
That's right. Yeah.
Rather than being selfish and just keeping you to herself.
And she could have quite easily.
Yeah.
But boarding school was wonderful. I just loved it.
Yeah.
Then I cried when I left.
Yeah. You were crying when you arrived, and you cried when you left.
I cried when I got mail, and the head nun would give me the mail after the basketball matches, because I cried.
Not before.
No. And then I cried when I left. Yeah.
So an important time in your life.
Oh, it was a very enriching time.
Yeah.
And those friends are still with me.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. So after all those years, you're still in contact.
Yeah.
The ones that are still alive.
The ones that are still with us.
Yeah.
And it was a small school. There were only 110 when we left school. You know, everybody knew everybody, no matter what year you were in. It was great.
When you look back on your life, you mentioned about your mum, how grateful you were, because as an only child, she gave you so much freedom to go away on holidays, to be with your country friends. What else did your parents teach you when you look back, as in the sense of what life lessons did they give you?
Oh gosh, that's hard to know. I mean, to be welcoming to people, well, that's to accept them. Try your best.
I remember once you were telling me when we were having some of our nails done at a beauty salon once. I know we were sitting together, and we'd had finished off a bottle of whiskey, or well, actually half a bottle at that stage. But you mentioned your mum. You said something about a friend. She was a nurse, and a friend of hers, I think, had died, or a parent had died, and they were a Protestant. And
yes.
The parish. Do you want to tell that story?
Oh well. My mother trained at the Brisbane General Hospital, which was a big public hospital. In those days, a lot of the Catholic girls went to the Mater. And so all her friends, which she kept to the day she died, all her nursing friends, were non-Catholics, I suppose you'd say, most of them. And because she came from the country, she had a very open mind to religion.
in days when the Protestants and Catholics were
Oh,
sort of
very
like
much so.
on the opposite
Yes.
polarities, and never
Yes.
the twain shall meet.
That's quite true. She had this wonderful open mind through her parents, who incidentally were both Irish.
Ah,
Irish Catholics,
yeah.
who came from Ireland, but they weren't, I suppose, bog Irish, and as it was referred to, and they would have ministers staying in their property as they travelled around the country, as well as priests. So
Wow.
she was just
So
so
she-
broad-minded. She was
brought up broad-minded.
She was post Vatican II
before Vatican II happened.
in the 30s, 40s, yes.
Yeah.
But she often said that friends died, and in those days you had to ask the priest if you could go to the funeral if it was a non-Catholic, and they'd say no.
You had to ask the priest.
And then sometimes they'd say you can stand in the back of the church. And she'd say to her father, as far as I'm concerned, it's a worse example if I don't go than if I go. And I'm going.
So she went.
Yeah, she made her own decision. And I've inherited a lot of that.
Good for you.
Yeah. Yes.
So the freedom to make your own decisions when.
Conscience. Yes.
So follow your conscience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that the integrity to listen to your conscience rather than what dogma or the rules say.
Well, also, apart from her, the Loreto nuns that educated us were very much that way before Vatican II. So I had it from both sides. Yeah.
Powerful.
Very powerful. Yeah. We were very fortunate with both my parents and the women that educated me.
I've got another story I remember from that. I think probably your favourite son Arnold. he remembers with your mum going when he was a wee lad. Gorgeous lad he was.
He was.
I heard he still is. You would be surprised in allowing this nowadays. But you'd go to the movies and they play God Save the Queen and everybody had to stand up.
Yes, that's
And
right.
he remembers being with your mother, his grandmother, and there they were. God Save the Queen comes up. This is the beginning of the movies, okay? And your mother grabbing his hand and saying, "Don't stand up. We're going to sit down. We will not stand for the Queen." Being of strong Irish blood, and just not liking the Irish not liking the British because of what they did to the Irish.
Well, actually, I don't remember that episode, but I know whenever I went with her, because women wore gloves in those days when you went out.
I've just only stopped wearing gloves.
Yes.
Joy.
Well, we all wore gloves, and she would always drop her gloves. She'd drop her gloves when God Save the Queen came on, and she'd be trying to find her gloves. Always did it without fail. So she never stood.
She was a clever one, wasn't she? She was.
A woman of her convictions.
Good for her. You notice I'm wearing two sets of glasses.
Yes, I was wondering why you were.
I have double vision.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I always thought you had one lot of glasses that fixed that up.
Yeah.
But
No,
you chose to
I've
have
always
two.
liked to stand out.
Oh, right.
As you probably noticed, you.
Right, yeah.
So I'd like to move on, Joy, to how did you meet your husband, Peter?
Well, I don't know. He always seemed to be there.
I hope in a good way.
Well, I met him through. Well, his sister was at school with me.
That was
Anne.
Anne, yes.
Well, she was a class ahead of me, but she was young and she repeated the final year. And then we used to go down to their home at Burwood and play tennis. And Peter and his brother Tom had a long study room, well, a bedroom, long study room, at the back of the tennis court, and he'd be there sometimes. I saw him there. But when I really got to know him, well, I met him, I knew him.
Yeah.
And when we made our debut, which was the year after we left school, I think he partnered Anne, so I met him then. But then when I was doing speech therapy at the Children's Hospital, he was a medical student there.
So you were studying speech therapy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we would walk through, I don't know, it wasn't their common room, but
His
it was
bedroom?
somewhere. Not really.
Oh.
No. It was a passageway or something. Maybe we were all using it both ways. And that's where I kind of
Bumped into him?
bumped into
Yeah,
him.
so to
And
speak.
that's where his thing started to ask me out.
After
that.
okay.
Yes.
Right. And how long were you going out before you got married?
Well, 12 months,
I'm impressed. Well, I'm impressed you can remember. That's a long time ago.
I would think. It's 12 months, yeah.
About 12 months, yeah.
Well,
Approximately.
12, yeah, 15 months. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The good old dating style.
Well, yes, we were rather young, but yes.
So how old were you when you got married?
I was 21.
21. A wee slip of a thing.
A wee slip of a thing.
Yeah. And now, did you have any other boyfriends before you met him?
I had a couple, not much, didn't go anywhere.
So it was Peter. And then, so you got married when you were 21. And how old were you when you had your first child?
I was, how was I, 53, 54, 22.
22, yeah. And that was
That was Michael.
Michael. He turned out all right, didn't he?
He turned out great.
Yeah.
And he's got a wonderful wife, a most beautiful wife.
What's her name?
Her name's Sue.
Sue, yeah.
Oh, she is a gem. She's the jewel in the crown.
She's a jewel in the crown.
Well, in the Western Australian crown, we've got a couple of other. They're not women jewels. They're men jewels.
And what about their children?
Now they've got two beautiful boys.
And what are their names?
Their names are James and Ben,
Yeah.
and they now have the most beautiful children and lovely wives.
And my lovely wives.
Lovely wives.
And you're actually, we're actually doing this in Perth, people, viewers. And you're over here at the moment because...
Because Ben, Michael's second son, has just had a baby boy called Oliver, and so that is my third great-grandchild. Very tiny.
That's
people.
another generation.
It's another generation. It's wonderful to see it, yes.
Yeah. Actually, what is it like to be in that position now when you see the clan, the Anderson clan expanding and another generation? You're a great-grandmother now. What's it actually like to be in that position?
Well, I don't know. It's kind of handing on.
Handing on, yeah.
I look around and I think, oh, I'm glad they're doing that, not me.
You've been there, done that.
I've been there, done that, and really enjoyed it. But now, maybe don't have the energy, but can enjoy it from a distance.
From a distance, yeah.
And just can appreciate the beauty of it and what they're doing each day, but happy that the next generation is doing it.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also very lucky that I'm able to be here and see it,
Yeah.
because a lot of people aren't.
I gather you're still using up frequent flyer points to travel around the world.
Within Australia, yeah, I like travelling, having a daughter in Melbourne,
Yeah.
and
So you can still get around.
still get around, day by day.
Day by day.
That's how I look at it,
Day
day
by-
by day.
Because you don't know if you're going to be around.
No, don't know how long you're going to be around, so day by day make the best of it.
Yeah. Another question I wanted to ask you was, when you may have touched on some of these, but when you look back on your life and all you've been through with where you grew up, going to boarding school, which sounded like a pivotal part of your life, but then marrying Peter, having 7 children, now and grandchildren, and now great-grandchildren. In the context of that, but also just as you as a human being, what stands out for you in your life? That's not an easy question.
Oh, certainly.
But
it's
what's
not.
maybe the first thing that comes to mind of when you, what stands out for you?
I think how fortunate I've been.
Uh-huh.
I mean, through my childhood. I had a very happy childhood, a young childhood, and then boarding school. A great time when I was studying, and a wonderful life with Peter. I just think I've been very, very fortunate. I've had a wonderful life. I've been very, very blessed.
Yeah.
And that's what stands out for me.
Yeah. I hear you saying you have a deep, you feel blessed and a deep sense of gratitude for the life you've had.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of people haven't been as lucky.
Yeah.
I mean, with Peter and my children now, I have been very, very blessed. Yeah. I'm very, very grateful for it.
As you say that, I'm thinking too about, do you want to say something about your time with Peter and India, and you and him going to India? Because I've heard that was also, in a way, an important part of your life and the impact that had on your family, on the kids as well.
That was
what was that about?
Very important part in our life, because it brought you back to basics.
Basics about?
Life, how to live. We saw these people that had absolutely nothing and were so happy. Poverty was terrible, but they were very happy. And the attitude of the Jesuits that we were with to the people there, and their attitude to life, and I shouldn't say it to the church, but their attitude to everybody. It just transformed us. It opened our eyes, I should say, not opened doors, opened our eyes. And then we came back, and I think our family were very grateful we've been, because we were more tolerant, more open-minded.
Yeah. So is that around, when you say more tolerant and more open-minded, around the dogma of the church?
Oh, very much so, but also about a lot of other things in life. Very more tolerant about the church, yes, but also more understanding of the kids. Yeah.
And do you think that had an impact on the kids?
I hope it did. I think it did. I think they said, "Thank God you went to India." So I think it did.
And what was the story about going to India? How did you end up going? And what did Peter do over there with you?
Well, he did ICANS. One time, one of the Australian Jesuits that were out visiting from India, from Hazaribagh, said to Peter, you could do work in India. And ICANS, and he said, I can't arrive unannounced in another country and work. You don't do that. So he went back then and got this other priest who had taught Peter as a 9-year-old, 10-year-old at Riverview, who was in charge of the Hazaribagh Lions Club. He sent a telegram, come immediately, ICANS, December, January. So we went in January, and I went with him. And he did these ICANS, which were very primitive, handheld torches in school halls on a table, and just was amazed at what the Indian doctors could do. We thought we were so wonderful here with our honorary system. Aren't we the greatest? We went over there, and here were these non-Christian people doing just as much, if not better.
Amazing stuff with very little.
Yeah. So that affected us, and then we went back 2 years later, and he then realised they need corneal grafting, and so he would take a few hours back and he taught them corneal grafting, and I just go because I love going. And a teacher of my youngest daughter, Jane, who was then in 5th grade, asked her, what does Mummy do when she goes to India? She says, nothing. So I said, you tell them that I visit. So that was funny. Anyway, it affected us greatly.
And what did you love about India?
I just loved their attitude to life. We didn't see a lot of India. We've never seen the Taj Mahal, because once you get to that region,
And this is Bihar, which is
Bihar,
actually one of the poorest
the
states.
poorest states in India. You just don't need to go and do anything else when you're there, and when you come home. It was just their attitude to life, to people, and to religion.
Yeah.
That was the big thing. Yeah,
And people, so something about the simplicity of their living.
that's right.
They weren't caught up in materialism
No way.
because they didn't have anything.
They didn't have it.
Yeah.
No. When I first went, my first trip, going through Singapore, I said, oh, great. I'm going to, it was in the years of the long ropes of pearls.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I'm going to get a rope of pearls coming back from India. You know, that is really what I want. And Peter said, okay, right. And when we left India and got back to Singapore, that was the last thing in the world I wanted. And I never got it. You just realise how unnecessary those kind of things were. So, you know, that's how it affected us.
Yeah.
But then 2 months after you're back in Australia, you're back on the treadmill. It's very easy to get back.
So how often did you end up going to India? Was it every couple of years? Or
Well, we went, in all, I think about 7 times.
over what? How many years all up?
From 19... I did 72... No, you finished 72 and 3. December 73 or 4. We realised December was better than January because the children were busy before Christmas. It was easy to leave them with help than in January. We went 74, 76, 78, 80, and then a couple of just the visits when he didn't do anything.
Yeah. So an impactful time.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
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 Well, it was within my 40s and his 50s. Yeah.
You were young.
I was young.
You were young. I just want to go back a little bit before then. Something about your early career. I think, I don't know if you were married at that stage, but I remember you talking about you're working with kids with speech. You were a speech therapist.
I was a speech
And in
therapist.
those days they called it what, the Spastic Centre, which is...
Although, no, there was a lot of speech therapy,
Yeah.
but I worked at the Spastic Centre.
What does that mean nowadays?
It's a Cerebral Palsy Association.
So that was the words they used then.
Yes, and that was set up by the McLeods, who came from Perth. They had a daughter, Jenny, who had very bad cerebral palsy, and they were on their way to England to go to get treatment. The war broke out, and they stopped in Sydney, and they started the Spastic Centre because of their daughter, Jenny. And that I worked with cerebral palsy children. But there, of course, there were adult clinics, there were stroke clinics, there were all those kind of things.
And how was that, working there?
I found it very, very good. I liked it. I enjoyed working with the kids.
And how long did you work there for?
I worked there for about 2 years
Yeah.
because I got married and had children.
You were otherwise occupied.
And in those days, we didn't work, you know.
Yeah.
We
And
were,
you didn't have
we were
childcare.
fortunate enough that we didn't have to work, and there wasn't childcare, and so it went on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But raising 7 children, if you're like people nowadays, the concept of raising 7 children, they think, how could you possibly do it? And yet, in that era, a lot of people had large families. But how did you do it?
Well, most of our friends had large families. You know, 5, 6, 7 children. It was half of the course. Well, life was simple. We were all starting off in the same way. Nobody had anything. We didn't aim to have what our parents had, which probably wasn't all that much anyway. And life was simple. And you know, we all kind of thought the same, and that's how you did it.
You just got in and did it.
Yeah, life, that's how it was.
Did you have any support? Like, did your mum and dad help?
Yes, thank God for them, yes. Oh, they were a great support, yes. Yes, they were always there. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, particularly with the two eldest, Michael and Robert, and Anne-Marie. They were down there a lot, you know. They were always there, but then they were getting older by the time the youngest ones came along.
So who helped you out in the...
In the latter years, we had this wonderful woman called Miss Searle.
Yeah.
She was always Miss Searle to everybody. And she'd come once a week, and then she was like a surrogate grandmother to Jane anyway. And she was always included in family things in those latter years. And she was a beautiful woman. You know, played all those funny games with them and everything.
This was before we had iPads
Oh God,
and
yes.
iPhones and
Nothing like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, on television, well, there was television, and it was Sunday night. They were allowed to watch Disneyland or something or other.
In black and white.
Black and white, and then, you know, off to bed. And yeah.
Yeah.
Life was simple.
Yeah.
We didn't have all those other things they have now, and that's how we managed.
Do you think that made it easier for you?
I'm sure it did. I'm quite sure it did. Yes.
What would you like to share with your grandchildren and great-grandchildren? From this, of what's important to you, or what's important about living life from this vantage point of where you are now in your life. So as you look back on your life, of how you've lived, what you've experienced, how you've seen your children grow up, and then how you've seen your grandchildren grow up, and now with the gift of seeing, actually being able to be with great-grandchildren, what would you like to say to them about what is important about living life?
Well, I think it's a bit hard with the great-grandchildren with what's ahead of them. Grandchildren, I think they have got a tremendous basis from their parents. I think they're pretty well, you know.
They've got a grounding.
They're very grounded, I think. Most of them. I would say to them, forget the machines. I know that's what life is about now. But make time for people, individually, one-to-one.
Connect with people.
Connect with people, and just be kind to people, and be true to yourself. That's important. I think that's all I can say.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the end, Beryl, is it?
That's the end, Joy.
Good. Oh, well, thank you, Beryl.
It's been a
very much.
pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Beryl.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Always look on the right side of life. Always look on the right side of life. Come on, Brian, get up. Always look on the right side of life.
Now, Joy, I noticed
Is
you,
it on?
It's on.
I noticed you're reading a little book there.
I am.
Yeah. Did you think this interview might be a bit boring? Not that I would take it personally, but I thought maybe it's, you may think you just needed to have a little bit of a read now and then.
Well, Beryl, I was waiting on you to come.
Oh, I see.
I realised it was taking you a long time to prepare yourself, and I was ready.
Oh.
So I decided to read the book while I
You
was
came
waiting.
well prepared. Good
I
on
did
you, Joy.
come prepared.
I was in the green room. I had my personal assistant,
well,
Sue.
I mean, it took you a long time, and I thought, well, I will read my book while I'm waiting. So I'm not bored, I'm just happy.
You're just well prepared.
Yeah, I'm well prepared.
I always remember you as a well prepared woman.
I hope I was.
You were.
I tried
You
to
were.
be. I had to
Well
be.
done. You had to be with 7 children.
I
You
had
had
to
7
be.
children, didn't you?
I had to be to survive.
To survive.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
on a chair.
And you survived well. I'm impressed.
Well, I hope I survived. It's now day to day. But before that, it was
It was week to week.
week to week, year to year. But now it's day to day. Yes.
Well, I see the lighting man here's just fixing up the light. I think it's mainly to get my better side.
I hope so.
You definitely got that, Beryl.
But it's certainly wonderful to be. It's not often I get to interview such well-preserved people.
Oh, thank you, Beryl, very much. I've heard a lot about you over the years.
You have?
And I'm
What have
very
you
good.
heard?
I've heard you're very, very good at interviewing people.
Yeah. Some people even say fabulous.
Well, you dress beautifully,
Thank you.
and I'm very pleased to meet you.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Uh-huh.
I think really that's enough for you talking about me. I think it's time for me to talk about myself.
Oh, well, if you want to do that, that's fine. You do tell me about
No,
yourself.
seriously, no. We're here to talk about you, Joy.
Go away.